Hello, my name is Marcus and this is Motion Graphics and Cheese, and today we're going to be creating this. Alright, so now we're back in After Effects, so let's create a new composition by clicking down on the thing, and let's call it clean. And the dimensions are wrong, 1920 by 1080. Yeah, there we go. Alright, now we have a new composition here. So let's start by making the text. So if we go up here and click on the text tool, let's call it grass. You can see my resolution is completely low. Let's set it to full. There we go. Let's align this bad boy here. Let's align it in the middle, and let's increase the size. Something along these hairlines, and let's set the paragraph to the middle. There we go. We can even change the font to something we like more, but we can always play with this later. Let's just do this, something cowboy-esque. So now let's pre-compose this layer. Click on the grass and go up into layer and say pre-compose. Let's call this text. Alright, bam. Now we add the text in here, and it's actually important that the text is black. We can always fix that later on, but we can just do it beforehand. There we go. And if you want to be able to see it, then you can just add a new layer, solid, make it completely white. Bam. And put it below the text, right click, and set it to guide layer, which means that in the comp higher up, it won't be rendered. You'll just see the text. Alright. So now let's go over to Effects and Presets over here, and let's apply a fractal noise. Double click. There we go. Now we have a nice juicy noise in the middle of the screen. So we're going to decrease the brightness. Well, actually, we can increase the contrast first. Let's make it a little bit dramatic here. Let's give it some grit. Let's take it down to maybe 5 in complexity, which will diminish the amount of small details it has on the edges. We want it a little bit softer. We can always change the type of noise as well. We can say, let's say, strings or something like this, so it looks like it's almost emanating from certain parts, right? And it's really growing. So we can say like this. Let's take it all the way down to 0, or at least it becomes completely black. Then let's take, wow, this is a really long composition. Let's change the composition settings. Let's take it down to, let's say, 10 seconds. All right, there we go. So let's say 4 seconds here. Let's just increase the brightness all the way up until it's completely white. And there we go. So if we activate the transparency here, we're going to be able to see how it goes from black to white. Now, we don't want it to actually be black. We want this part to be invisible. So we're going to apply an effect called unmult. And I'll link to this in the description. It's actually a free plugin you can get from Knoll. So just apply unmult. What unmult does, as you can see here, it takes away the black color of a frame and converts it into transparent. So this is extremely practical for many situations, right? Let's apply a little bit of a background here so we can see what the heck we're doing. So let's go into layer, solid, and let's say something bluish, because let's face it, blue it's just a good color. Let's just call it background, and let's put it below the text like that. Oh, look at that. Come on. That's just, all right. So now we have this text going on, right? Maybe we can apply the gradient already, because why the hell not, right? So let's go over here, and let's say gradient, come on, gradient wrap, there we go. Let's apply this to the text. So right now you can see the top is very far away and the bottom is very far away. So we're going to have to bring that all the way up to the bottom of the text and the top of the text. Let's take the bottom color and let's make it something like really succulent green here someplace, you know, some really deliciousness. And let's take the top color, pick the color of the bottom, and let's just make it a little bit brighter, you know, just a little smidge, maybe a little bit of cyan, you know, just really get that going. Now the background is way too bright, so I'm going to go up into layer, solid settings, and I'm just gonna make this a little bit darker, more saturated, something like this, someplace, somewhere. All right, okay, and okay. All right, now we have the text and the mapping thing. So let's start by making the grass. So let's go up here. So layer, new, solid. Let's call this straw. All right, let's just, and this can actually be a gray. It doesn't really matter what color it is because we're going to change it. Press OK. Now we're going to pre-compose this. So Control-Shift-C or layer, pre-compose. We're going to move all attributes and we're going to say, call this grass. All right. Bam. Now we have this grass composition, but it's way too big for our purposes. So we're going to go up into composition settings, and we're going to call it, let's say, 128 times 128. Bam. Now the solid is also way too big, so layer, solid settings, make comp size, so it will automatically adjust to the comp dimensions, and OK. All right, now I'm going to zoom in here. I just pressed Z to get the zoom tool, and then you can click to zoom in and Alt-click to zoom out. I use this way too often. All right, so now we have the straw. So I'm going to go up here to the mask tool. I'm going to make myself a very cute little straw here, you know, just this typical type of straw that you see in nature if we were in an anime world and, you know, everything was nice and beautiful and fluffy unicorns. So something along these hairlines, you know, something thick, something nice and dramatic and toony, because that's what we're going for here. So, all right, so now we can see the anchor point is all the way up there, and when we rotate it, it's going to look quite weird. It's just going to rotate, and this axis is not going to work. So I'm going to go up here to the anchor point, or the pan behind tool, my apologies, and just take this anchor point all the way down here. There we go. Because now when we rotate, holy heck, now it's looking quite correct. So I'm going to keyframe this rotation at the first frame, and I'm going to keyframe it at, let's say, 4 seconds. Something along, yeah, there you go. And at 2 seconds, I'm going to rotate it a little bit to the right. All right, so let's select all these 3 keyframes, and let's right-click keyframe velocity. So this is just a different way of controlling the easings of a keyframe. So if you're going into a keyframe or going out of a keyframe, you can dictate how much that keyframe influences the animation. So let's say when we go into these keyframes, I want it to go to a complete 0 in speed. I want it to get to a complete stop, and I want them to be 80% influence, which means that it will ease in for quite a long time. The exact same thing when we're easing out, so 0 speed and 80% influence, and OK. And just to see what that means, I can go up here to the graph editor, and I'm going to go down here and visualize speed so it's easier. So you see it's easing out and it's moving very rapidly in the middle and then easing in, and the exact same thing at the end here. So you can see how that looks. Boom, boom. Might be a little bit too much, so we can just select them again, right click, keyframe velocity, let's say 60, you know, good old 60s. And there we go. So now we're happy with this. So let's just duplicate this, Control D and R for rotation. I'm just gonna click on rotation so it selects all the keyframe, and while I'm on the keyframe, I can rotate it to a certain angle and it will affect all the other keyframes. Now this is very valuable. I'm going to press my apologies. I'm going to press Shift S to bring up the scale as well. I'm going to scale this down a smidge, you know, make it a little bit asymmetrical. I'm going to duplicate this bad boy again. I'm going to press R and Shift S. I'm going to do the exact same thing. Control, there we go, just, you know, rotate that bad boy, you know, just, all right, there we go. So now we have 3 straws, but they're moving uniformly. That's not cool. I mean, come on. Nobody likes a follower. So let's minimize these, select all layers, press U for, you know, uniformity, and let's Alt-click. If you hold Alt button down or Option on Mac and click on the property, you can enter an expression. Let's use one that's called Loop Out. Now this is an awesome expression. When it reaches the last keyframe, it's going to start repeating the exact same animation endlessly. So let's just copy, let's just right click on rotation, copy expression only, and then select the other 2 layers and press Control B to paste. And wham-a-lama ding dong. Now they're looping endlessly, but they're still uniform, boring. But now we can just move these top keyframes behind, you know, a smidge like this, and Same with this, just control click on one of them so that you only have one property selected. And see, now they're moving asynchronously. Probably way too much. Let's calm down a little bit, right? Let's just offset them a little bit. Just like this. All right. Something like this. Just. So now we want these pieces of grass to inherit the colors of the layer below it. So let's set that up. Let's move this piece of grass up here someplace. And you know what? Let's move the anchor points. Okay, let's just come on. Let's face it. We're gonna have to rotate that grass, all right? So now we have this. So what we want is a gradient ramp. Perfect. It's already selected. See, and the cool thing is, since this is a pre-comp, it's just gonna take the height and the bottom of this existing pre-comp. So it's not gonna be far off. So something like this. All right. So I'll click on end color and let's start writing a very juicy expression. So let's write layer. All right. Because let's basically need a layer. And we're gonna pick whip, use this little whip, like, you know, Indiana Jones, just a good whip, and take it all the way down to text, all right? Because we wanted to sample from that text, all right? Next we have is sample. Now it looks like I'm writing something new, but these are variables. We're creating this to define a value within that variable. So I'm just making these names up and then I'm attributing a value to them. So let's say sample. This is going to be a two-dimensional coordinate. So you can see here we have two values for the end of ramp to show where we are on the screen, because we need two coordinates to show something on the screen, right? We need X and Y. So sample, we're going to make square brackets by pressing Control Alt and then parentheses. Then we're going to write, let's say, 5, 5. Now these are the amount of pixels. This will become relevant in a second. But I want it to sample 5 times 5 pixels, all right? Now we're going to create another variable called mover equals something. Now we haven't created this layer yet, but we will in a second. So we'll just write transform position. There we go. So basically, whenever I have created this layer, I want it to take its position at that point in time. And now, enter to move to the next line. We're going to write coord, which is for coordinates, but that was way too long, so I got bored. So I'm going to say this layer. So it's going to look at itself and say transform, whoopsie daisy, transform dot position. So it's going to look at its own position unadulterated by anything else, plus mover for when I have this information. We don't have it yet, but we will. And now we're going to go to the next line here. Now here's where it gets interesting. We're going to write layer. If you remember, that's the text layer, you know, with a green grass thingamabob, dot sample image. Now this is a function that is built into After Effects expressions where it actually samples the image wherever you want. So let's say we want this layer. No, my apologies. It's supposed to have coord. So it's going to look at this coordinate and we're going to say sample. So it knows to pick these samples or this dimension of samples. Then we're going to write true, because here it's asking, did you want it to sample before or after effects and masks are applied? We do want it to sample after it's applied, right? And then we want to write time. So it looks at the current point in time and samples here. So it samples every single frame. Bam. So right now it's black because it doesn't have everything we need. So let's create a layer, new, and null object. Now this is going to be our mover. Now null objects are basically quote unquote empty layers. They don't render anything. They don't do anything inherently, but you can attach things to them. You can add controls to them. You can modify them. So now we're going to go down here where we wrote mover, and then we're going to pick whip all the way up to this bad boy and that dot. There we go. See, it's still not doing anything correctly, but that's because we are going to parent this piece of grass to the mover. See, now it's sampling the color from below. And see, this is quite cool. I'm going to press position, or I can just moving around. You can see like this, when I move it around, it's inheriting the colors below that layer. And isn't that just plain awesome? So if we change the cyan, so let's say red, whoopsie daisy, now the grass is red. Blue, whatever you want. You can go full funky bunk. All right, so let's get it on here. So now we have the grass, and it's popping on, and see it's inheriting the color, but it's still hanging in the air when the text dissipates, right? And that's not cool. I mean, come on, that's just not cool. So now we want the scale. We want it to scale down whenever there is no alpha below it. So now press E twice on the layer, and it will show you whatever you have written expressions on. Just gonna click on this, copy, and I'm gonna press on grass again, Shift S, and I'm gonna click on scale and paste it. So right now it's going to give me an error because what it's sampling is actually 4 coordinates. So whenever we write sample image, it's going to give you back 4 coordinates in one value because there's R, G, B, and A when it samples a color, and that stands for R, red, G, green, B, blue, and A for alpha. So right now it's giving us 4 coordinates, and the scale is saying like, yo, I can't use this for anything, all right? So let's go at the beginning of this, and let's write A, big A, capital A, and then equals this. So the cool thing is, now we created this entire sample into a variable. So if we go down here, 2 steps here, now we're going to write another cool expression called linear. You know what? Let's make it even easier. When you've written an expression, you can see this little bit of an arrow underneath the property. And see, now it shows you all the different expressions you can actually have access to. So you can actually test them out themselves and see, maybe you don't know the name of something. You can just look it up here and use it directly if you click on it. So if you go up to interpolation, which is what we need, and we're going to click on linear. All right. So linear is taking a value and it's remapping it between 2 other values you give it. So if you give it like 0.5, and then value 1 is 0, and this value is 100, it will give you 50, because it's remapping that value to your new minimum and maximum. All right, so this first one here is going to be A, and because we know A is an array with 4 coordinates like we talked about before, we're going to create square brackets by Control-Alt clicking parentheses. Then we're going to click 3. And you might be thinking, well, why aren't you clicking 4? Well, programming starts with 0. They don't start at 1, 2, 3, 4. They count 0, 1, 2, 3. So 0 is actually 1 and 3 is actually 4. All right. So we're looking at the alpha. So we're going to say, when there's no alpha, then please be 0 scale. And when there is alpha, then please be 100 scale. All right. And it's giving me an error. Why is it giving me an error? Ah, right. It gives me an error again because I'm only giving it 1 dimension and scale is 2-dimensional. So we have to make, instead of 0, we have to make square brackets 0, comma 0. So both x and y are 0. Then square brackets 100, comma 100. And there we go. Now see, whenever the alpha is gone, the grass is disappearing. Oh, hell yeah. So now we have that bad boyness. So now let's just say the top of the grass can be the same color as, or maybe, let's just make it lighter. Just a light snippet of grass up there having fun for itself, just wincing and waffling all over the place, So now we have the basic expression for the scale, okay? But we still want to be able to create some randomness between them, right? When we duplicate them around, we want them to be able to have some randomness. So let's create a control layer. So let's go up to layer, null object, and let's call this bad boy control. Control me, baby. Yeah. And let's apply a slider controller. It is right here. Bam. All right. Let's call this rotation random. Duplicate this and call this scale random. There we go. All right. Now let's press E to make them appear here, and let's just expand those bad boys. All right. So let's minimize this. All right, so let's apply some randomness to this scale, right? Because it will be boring if it's completely uniform every single time we duplicate it. I mean, come on, let's not, come on, all right? So let's start by writing seed random, and this will determine the random seed of this layer, and we want it to look at index. So it's looking at this own layer's index, which in this case is 3, making sure that every single layer has their own random seed. And then we're going to write true. And the reason we're going to write true is because this is asking whether or not this is timeless. And we want it to be timeless, which means that it will not randomize for every single frame. All right, if we had it on false, every single frame, it would randomize to a new value. We don't want that. So next line here, we're going to write r for arg, or random, equals semicolon. Now we're going to write this wonderful random function, and we're going to give it 2 values. All right, we're going to pick whip this up to our scale random, and then comma, and once again, pick whip it up to our scale random. And in front of the first one, we're going to write minus. So this means that it's going to look at our scale random effect, and then it's going to take, if we write 10, for example, it's going to make the first number minus 10 and the second number plus 10. And it's going to choose a random number between those 2 values for this layer. So that's awesome possum. All right. Then down here, we're going to write minus square brackets, arg and arg. So it's going to take this random value and detract it from the final scale of this expression. Awesome sauce. So let's click on rotation now, because we want the same exact thing for this one, right? We want it to randomize every single time we duplicate it. So it's not a boring loring or something, right? So let's write true. And let's say once again, random. Exact same thing, pick whip and whoops. The exact same thing, pick whip up to rotation random, comma, pick whip up to rotation random. And then apply a little bit of a minus in front of the first one. Bam, ding dong. All right. So now we can even already see it now. If we move the scale random, it's already randomizing. And if we move the rotation random, it's already randomizing. So now it's time to duplicate some grass, baby. So let's just duplicate this and just place it around, you know. I mean, come on, let's just have fun with this, you know. Just move it around. All right, so now I've duplicated all this grass and it's looking very grassy. I mean, let's just face it. Look at that. Look at the grassness. Come on, okay. So let's go up into rotation random. Let's play around with this. We can say like 15, you know, it's starting to look a little bit more cool, you know. We want it to look cool. Let's just, you know, play around with the amount of randomness here. You know, we can generally detracts, you know, something like this. All right, so now if we scrub to the left, oops, look at this. Look at these disgusting pieces of grass that simply will not disappear. All right, we're gonna have to get the hedge trimmer or something, right? Oh, but even better, let's just click on the first layer and press T for opacity and S, Shift S to get the scale, because we're going to take parts of this expression and use it to filter out whether or not it should be invisible or not. So I'll click on opacity now and paste the scale expression. All right, let's expand this. So we're gonna just change a few things here. We do not need random. Let's just delete that. We do not need seed random. Don't need that. And we do not need this part. And we don't need the linear either. Bam. So let's look at this bad boy. We're gonna ask it one simple question. If, parentheses, a square brackets 3 is equals, double equal sign, so that you're comparing whether or not it is actually 0. If you only had one equal sign, you would be telling the expression that the fourth dimension of A should be 0. We don't want that. We want to ask it, are you 0? So 2 equal signs. We're going to ask it, are you 0? Are you a 0 or are you a hero? Now we're going to start these curly bracket thingamabobs here. So if you are 0, then please make opacity 0. Otherwise, else, you should be 100, all right? See, now, this is giving me 0. As you can see here, it's hidden here somewhere. So if we right-click on opacity, copy expression only, I'm just going to paste this bad boy on every single piece of grass. Bam! Look at that. Now they're disappearing when they shouldn't be seen. I mean, come on, that is the right kind of grass. I mean, oh, okay, that sounds weird. So you may also be curious as to how I made the drop. So I'm just gonna change the color of this layer smidge here. Let's just say solid settings. Let's take this. Let's take it down to really, it's really dark blue. You know, something like this. All right, just really crank it down. All right. So now we're gonna create a drop. All right. So let's we can go all the way to the beginning here. So let's create a drop. Let's go up here to the mask layer, and since we have no layer selected, it's automatically going to create a shape layer, which is what we want. Actually, you know what? Let's make a sphere. So I'm just gonna keep clicking left click here and choose ellipse tool. And then I'm gonna start drawing here and holding Control down and Alt down and Shift down, so it makes a perfect circle coming in from the middle. Something along these lines. These colors are horrible, so I'm going to change this. So I'm going to go down into ellipse. I'm going to take the stroke and I'm going to delete it. Bam! Now take the fill. I'm going to give it more of a, you know, cyan saturated niceness color here. Something like this. Bam! Alright. And so last time I actually animated this from shape to shape. So I actually right click on the ellipse path and convert to Bezier path. And not only does that sound cool, but that means that we can, if we select the pen tool, we can now modify the shape however we want. All right. So let's just say, you know what, let's just isolate this bad boy by pressing the little solo button here. Let's make a keyframe on this thingamabob here. Then we go to the first keyframe here. Now we can make that typical, whoopsie daisy. We're gonna make that typical drop shape here. You know, let's just take the pencil here. You know, let's just make a drop. You know, like we all know that nice drop shape. You know, like you know, like that nice watery drop. You know, something like this. Actually, we can animate this on the layer, so we can just maybe only make the actual sphere part. So let's say 1 second here. Let's just move all these keyframes. And the first keyframe here, I'm just going to select the entire path. Yes, the entire path. Bam. Now I'm going to press Control T to transform it. I'm going to transform it up. And this is not going to align at all with where it was originally, but I can skip between keyframes. If you press K, you will go forward in keyframe. If you press J, you will go backward a keyframe. So I'm just going to move this around until I hit the thing. There we go. Something like this. So, and now it falls down, right? It just does that nice wobble thing. So now we have the basic drop here, right? So let's pre-compose this bad boy. Let's go up into layer, pre-compose, drop. There we go. Pre-compose. So now we're going to give it more shape and animate this stuff a bit. So let's just right click on this little keyframe here and say keyframe velocity. Let's just give it speed 0 and influence 70. There we go. And this could be quite close actually. There we go. Alright. So now let's just duplicate the drop. And now, since it's a shape, we can just fill it with a new color up here. Something a little darker, more saturated. Something like this. And let's apply a simple choker. Now this is gonna increase or detract the alpha mate of the shape, right? So let's just bring it in. Let's just increase the choke here. Let's just apply a fast blur. And there we go. You know, see, now we're starting to get some shape here. All right. So let's just do the exact same thing. Duplicates. Now we're going to move it a little bit down. Something like this here thing. Let's make this like a nice refraction color. You know, like just give it a little bit of a smidge here. You know, we can even like decrease its size a little bit more. Duplicate the choke. Something like this. Whoops. Something like this, and then decrease the blur, something like this. And you can duplicate it again and make it into like a specular highlight, you know, like a highlight on a drop. So let's make it completely white, and let's just move it up here someplace. Maybe we can even rotate it a smidge, just a smidge, you know, something like this. Maybe make it even smaller, something like this, right? So now it's doing a bloom, nice drop thing, and the highlight doesn't follow, so we can always keyframe the position of the drop here, something like this. Take it down. It's being choked too much. So let's just animate the choke here and the blur. Go to the next frame. Decrease the blur a smidge. Decrease the choke a smidge. Wow, that was more than a smidge. Something like this. So let's go back into our main comp here. So let's just move it all the way to the top here, someplace here, you know. And it's gonna drop and it's gonna land there, right? So just animate the position here and the scale. So we say there, and here we want a scale keyframe. Maybe, and here we want a scale keyframe. There we go. And here we also want a scale keyframe and one right after as well. We're gonna make this like make a nice wobbly animation. Right? So from this point on, we also want to animate the position. So it falls down all the way down to hit the text or something like this. Really dramatic. We're gonna scale it down, something like this. Now right now this is not gonna make any wobbly, it's just gonna scale down and fall down. But we wanted to make this nice little wobbly animation. So we're gonna use an expression called inertial bounce. So you can get the inertial bounce expression from this website called graymachine.com by, I'm assuming, Harry J. Frank. And he has like several different awesome expressions up here that you can just take from, because like he writes himself, a lot of them are community efforts or something that he worked on himself. And they're simply amazing expressions that are really worth playing around with, you know, finding and experimenting and trying your own things on. So I would definitely recommend playing around with this. I'll leave a link in the description. So we're gonna give it some nice wobbly animation here. So we're gonna alt-click on scale and paste in our inertial bounce. Now this is an awesome expression. So in the scale keyframe between the two keyframes, let's just say 70. So this is gonna make it like wobble forth and back. You can see boing. And we can always increase this. We can make this more sensitive. We can say it has lower decay and higher frequency. So it wobbles more and it takes longer time for it to stop wobbling. That's probably a little bit too much, but you get the point. So we have this, but we still don't have that nice wobbly velocity thing going on, right? So let's apply a turbulent displacement. Let's double click on this bad boy. All right, so right now it's just distorting everything, very ugly. So let's set the size to 60-ish. We're gonna say the turbulence starts here. Keyframe before, say no turbulence. We want this drop to be perfect. And there it starts to distort. Now we want it to animate as it goes down. So we're gonna click on offset turbulence, go all the way to the last keyframe, and we're gonna pull this up, something like this. And then we're gonna press U to get all the animated properties. We're gonna do the exact same thing, Control-Shift-K on the turbulence keyframe, speed 0, influence 80. So now you can see it's gonna start slow and go faster the more it falls down, right? It's still very large, let's say like 40. So let's animate the mover and some scale and some good stuff, right? So we want this to have this position. And we want it to animate from upwards here, so we maybe move this down. So we land on the logo. Let's just fit this. So we eventually land on the logo, right? Bloops. Unless temporarily we can select all these grass layers and we can hide them to make it render a little bit faster, which is nice. And it's also a lot of layers, so if we press toggle switch and click on the little hide icon, and then click on the hide icon up here, we can actually hide them all at once, which is pretty bloody nice. Okay, so something like this. The drop starts and it starts to fall and it hits. Bam, something like this, right? So right now there's not a lot of easing, it doesn't look very pretty. So let's start by also zooming in a smidge. So let's say we're gonna end out here. So we're gonna keyframe the scale. There we go. I'm gonna keyframe the scale. I'm gonna say that it starts to zoom out about where it hits it. So let's say zoom in, something like this. There we go. And then we just zoom out over time, something like this. So it hits it, and maybe we want to like ease out this a smidge, you know, like 0 and 30% probably, you know, something like this. So it just falls, ploops. Let's take the brightness that we've animated on this layer and then just offset it. And we can almost, you know, like select the last keyframe and increase the easing 0, 80. And you may recall like there was like more details, you know, it was dark and all that stuff, and that was quite easy. You can just duplicate the text and call it, let's say, dark, right? And let's just say we offset the original ones, a smidge like this, and put the dark underneath that one. And we'll just basically make it darker, you know, just take the brightness down to 70, take this bad boy down to 50, maybe actually let's just saturate it more as well. Let's just manually move it around, something like this. All right, just gonna have like 2 waves of grass growing, right? And the first one can be maybe a little bit softer, maybe like 600 or something like this, maybe even softer yet, maybe even like 200. Then you can always like play around with the contrast of it, you know, so that it feels more correct. And the initial drop effect is also quite easy. I basically just duplicated the text. We just take this dark one, and we just delete all these effects. I just press Control A, delete. We're gonna call this text water. I'm gonna go over here. We're gonna say fill. All right, double click. Let's just give it this nice cyan blue thingamabob color here. Then we're gonna go up to the ellipse tool, create a perfect circle here someplace, you know, that's a really nice perfect circle, and Control T to modify it. Just so it, you know, reaches the outskirts of, you know what, even better. We can just take it exactly where it hits, you know, so it's from the center. So let's do it like this. And let's say, where are we? Here it hits, right? So right here, we're gonna keyframe the mask expansion. We're gonna take it all the way down, something like this. Then go, I don't know, a few keyframes into the future, something like this, and then set it to 0, okay? But now it's just still completely blue, right? And we can ease this last keyframe, let's say 0 to 80, something like this. Bam, all right? But now it's still filling everything. So I'm just gonna close all this stuff to not distract myself. Then duplicate this mask that you've created, set it to subtract, and now just offset these new keyframes a smidge so that it creates basically a wave. And there you go. Drop falls, and bam, it hits this. Hits the logo. And if you want, you know, that nice gradient that I also did before on the background, you could just duplicate the background. You could go up to the layer, solid settings, give it a nice cyanish color here. Now take a nice mask, you know, like a really juicy mask. Make a nice large mask here. Now let's just feather it quite a smidge, something like this. And I basically, when the water drop hits, I animated the expansion. So if we go into the future, something like this, make a keyframe, and then go back to the original keyframe and just pull it all the way down, There we go. So it just makes this nice lighting up effect. And you can select the last keyframe, give it some nice easing, 0 speed, 80 influence, and fit the screen here. And there we go. If you want to know more about the sample image expression, which is awesome, you can go here to motionscript.com, which is something that this amazing dude called Dan Ebberts has set up. And he's simply amazing. I mean, he knows everything about expressions. It's ridiculous. So you can actually see here how he actually breaks down the expression and explains every single part of it so that you can better understand and do these things yourself. So I encourage you to look through his website and learn everything you can from it, because it's just plain awesome. So I really hope you enjoyed this tutorial and that you can already see in your mind all the new creative things that you can do with this setup, right? Just being able to sample the image and turn it into data or scaling or animation or something else, or just revealing stuff, right? So I'm looking forward to seeing what you guys create with this. And you know what? Have a cheesy day. Much affection.